What we're doing is, we're going through Mishpatim with the presumption that there's an order to the variety of halachos. And in general, there's two parts to Mishpatim, from beginning till Shishi. The first part is the lavim, the loita says, and by the way, I'm going to stop halfway. I'm not going to do the whole thing, because if I finish the whole Mishpatim, I'll be doing it till B'chugoisai. I'm going to just do the lavim. I'll save the image from the essay for next year. The first half is the loita says. And what we're trying to do is find an order. So of course, Eved Ivri and Omo Ivriya is not instructions to us, it's instructions to Moshe Rabbeinu to raise us up. Then you start with the worst. Murder. Right? When a person kills a person. But included in killing a person is many halachos, including hitting your parents and cursing your parents. And attempted murder, trying to kill a person where you don't succeed, well, it's also included in the halachos of murder. That's the first category. Second category is when a person hits his friend without intent. He doesn't have a kavanah to kill him. He doesn't mean to kill him. And la yihi asay, nobody got killed, so then you have to pay monetary stuff, and so forth. The third block of halachos of Mishpatim was mamon hamazik, where my wealth hurts a person or an animal and kills them. A shayr that kills a person, a shayr that kills an animal, a boyer that kills a person, a boyer that kills an animal. So it's called my property has not just done damage, it's brought death to a person. So there's a series of halachos that are associated with this. This is the fourth category. Now last week we started the fifth category, a person damaging the property of another person. But I explained to you that in a person damaging the property of another person, there's two levels. There's a ganev, or a gazlan, and a regular person who does damage. What's the difference? And again, this is I think it's a correct yisod. I think when you learn, like I said, hachoyvel and other places in the Bavis, you get that impression from the way the halachas are determined, with the halacha paskins. There is a presumption. The presumption is people live together, they don't want to hurt each other. People live together, they don't want to cause damage to each other, to each other's properties. Because of that presumption, there's always a leniency on the mazik. The one who does the damage is treated more nicely, because we say that it is part of life, like the example that I gave you of a man who marries a woman and he brings dishes into the house and she breaks the dishes. Technically she has to pay for the dishes, but if she has to pay for the dishes, in fact, they don't have a marriage, they have a tyranny. It has to be normal. So most people who hurt other people in all kinds of scenarios and hurt the property of other people, because we assume that people want to live in the community, we're lenient on the mazik. What's the exception? A ganev and a gazlan. A ganev is a person who disregards the community. He's stealing. Stealing doesn't mean I'm living my life and because we were on the same street, so my car banged into your car or something to that effect. A ganev means I disregard the laws of civilization. It's yours and I'm taking it. Why? Because I'm not a mensch. Which is why by a ganev the halacha is, if you're not sure, you assume he's a murderer. Habal laharga, hashkem laharga. There's no questions asked unless you know for sure that he's not going to hurt you. Now Rashi says, when do you know for sure he's not going to hurt you? If he's your father. Well, the way I interpret it is, sometimes people steal not because they're ganavim. Some people steal because they're desperate. And there's a big difference in halacha between a person who makes a living out of theft and the person who's pushed starving and steals. The first person has announced himself to be out of the civilization. The second person is Pasha trying to put food on his table to feed his family. I don't know how that would play out technically in the halachos, but in philosophy there's a very big difference between those two things. So the last thing we learned, Rabbi Isai, is a person damaging the property of another person. There's two categories. Category A, I'm damaging your property by stealing. If I damage your property by stealing, I have divorced myself from the civilization. The standards of payment are very high. I pay double or 2 times double or even more. What about if I damage a person or the person's property in normal social interactions? So the halachas are always lenient on the mazik. I'm going to say it one more time. there's two categories of a person who damages the property of another. The first category is a ganav. A ganav announces himself as out of the community, and the Torah is not a chmanas on him. The second is a person who damages within the normal order of life, and here there's more leniency, like v'hamesi eloi, like I mentioned. Here's the problem. According to if I'm right, if I'm giving you a correct sequence in the Chumash, there's something missing. Why? After the Torah tells you all the halachos of Ganev, the Torah should tell you the halachos of a person damaging another person's property. And it doesn't. It doesn't. It goes straight to Mamon Amazi, which I'm going to explain momentarily. So my insight is, my comment is, this is what I said last week, is the Torah talks about a Ganev, a person who damages because he has no regard for other people's property, doesn't tell you about the second category of Ganev, of Mazik, a person who damages with regard to other person's property, because the Torah says we'll figure that out from the halachas before and the halachas after. By telling us the halachas of a Ganev, by telling us the halachas of the Dalet Shemim, which we're going to get to, I hope, today. When you combine these two extremes, so you can figure out what the Torah would say if I damaged your property quasi by mistake as a member of the civilization. This is how I'm approaching it. So again, if I'm correct, if I just told you something which is correct, this is the sequence. Number one, a person who damaged another person's property as a ganev. Number two, a person who damages another person's property as a member of the civilization. Number three, if my property damages your property. What's an example of my property damaging your property? There's two examples. If my animal goes into your property, into your house, into your field, and it eats up your vegetation, or it tramples on your property, the halacha is I have to pay for the damage that my animal did to your property. Why? Because it's normal, so animals do. If my animal, I have an animal, and he walked into your field, not in the street, he walked into your field, and he ate your vegetation, I have to pay for that vegetation because animals eat, that's why. So I have to protect you from my animal. We had before Kenan, right? I don't have to protect you from my animal goring you because it's not normal. Most animals don't go around killing. But animals eat, and animals walk, and when animals walk, they don't pay attention to where they're walking. So the halacha therefore is, I have to watch my animal from damaging your property. If my animal goes into your reshus, eats up your food, or my animal goes into your reshus and tramples on your property, I have to pay. That's the halacha. I have to pay full. I have to pay. One of the interesting halachas would be, if my animal ate very expensive food, does he have to pay for the full value of the food? Does he have to pay how much he had hanoah, how much the animal needs? Or alternatively, if my animal ate your food and it hurt my animal, what will be in that case? He ate the wrong kind of food and it gave him some kind of a intestinal problem. So how do my animal went to your reshus and ate food which was bad for him and he suffered because of it. So what is my liability for you? Because my animal damaged your property and hurt himself. This is called mamon amazik. My wealth who does damage to you in a way that's normal. In a way that's normal. So after you talk about a person damaging another person's property, you're talking about a person's property damaging another person's property. My animal walks in the street, he's not liable. My animal goes into your reshus, he is liable. And then there's one more thing. This one more thing is very interesting. And the one more thing is called Aish. Fire. If I make a fire in my domain, my own private property, whatever the details are, there's a wind and it comes and it carries the flame and it goes from my reshus into your reshus. It eats up your wealth, it eats up your standing grain or your already bundled grain. So I have to pay. I have to pay. When my fire leaves my reshus and goes into your reshus and does damage, I'm obligated to pay. Why? Because I have to look over. If I make a fire, I got to watch it. So I just want to share with you an insight, a yeshivish insight about this, okay? And I'm not saying that this is lahalacha, this is just a thought when you're thinking about chumash, okay? But I want to remind you of what we're saying now. I'm proposing to you that Parshas Mishpatim goes in the following sequence. Number one, if I hurt your property with disrespect for you. Number 2, I hurt your property with respect for you. Number 3, my animal does damage to your property in a way that's normal for animals to do. And number 4, I light a fire in my reshus. It travels from my reshus to your reshus and it burns your property that I need to pay. So in Gemara, this is machlokes. It's the end of Masechta Bava Kama, and it's the end of Hilchos, whatever it is, Mamon HaMazik, in the Rambam. When my fire does damage to your property, is that considered, the expression of the Gemara is Eishe Mishum Amoinoi or Eishe Mishum Chitzei? Is my fire doing damage in your property the same thing as me pulling back on a bow and shooting an arrow, as if I did it myself? Or is my fire going out of my reshus and doing damage in your reshus, Eishe Mishum Amoinoi, like my animal going from my reshus into your reshus? I'll repeat the question again. I lit a fire, I lit it myself. And the wind came, it doesn't have to be a particularly big wind, and it carried the fire from my reshus into your reshus. Is that considered I shot an arrow and did damage in reshus? Or is that considered my animal went from my reshus into your reshus? What will be the difference? The difference is very simple. If we say that lighting a fire is mishum chitzei, then eish is adam hamazik. If me making a fire that goes into your reshus and does the damage, it's like me pulling back on a bow and shooting an arrow. I did that myself. And the halachos are more strict. On the other hand, if we say that lighting a fire and the fire traveling from one reshus to another is like my animal, like my property, like my mamon, going from here to there to do damage, so you can be more lenient. So in the Gemara there's a machlokes. But if we're correct, there's a big if we're correct that these psukim have a sequence, you could prove from the Chumash that Eishe is Mishum Amoinoi, Eishe is not Mishum Chitz. That the damage that my fire does to your reshus is like an animal doing damage, not like me shooting an arrow. Because if fire was like me shooting an arrow, it would be before Shen V'Regel. You would first have the halacha of fire, then you have the halacha of my animal eating your possession or trampling on your ground, and so on and so forth. The fact that Eish is after Shen V'Regel is proof that Eish Mishum Amoinoi, if my fire goes from my house into your house and does damage in your house, I'm liable, but I'm liable like my animal did damage, not like I did damage myself. So, let's stop. 4 ideas. So far, 4. A person damages another person's property with disregard for another person, a ganav. A person damages another person's property, but he does have regard for another person's property. This one you don't even have in the Chumash. The Chumash assumes we'll figure it out from the other halachos. Number 3, my animal goes into your reshus and does damage. And number 4, my fire goes from my reshus to your reshus and does damage. 4 categories of a person or the person's wealth damaging the wealth of another person. That's what we're dealing with. I didn't hurt any person. I just caused you a loss of money. I either caused you a loss of money because of my own body, or I caused you a loss of money because of property that I possess, and the various halachas that apply. What comes next? If any questions or comments?
Be smart to light a fire.
You have to be smart to control the fire. So then comes the shaila, ruach metzuya, ruach sheina metzuya.
It's real thought in my brain. Like, I don't know.
But you did. You did. Something happened, and you lost. In other words, we're not talking about a pesheya. If a person was negligent, it's different halachas. We're talking about a person who did his best to protect his fire, and for in some way the fire got out of control. So there's different halachas. Ruach metzuya, was it a normal wind? Was it an abnormal wind? And so on and so forth. But I'm arguing that according to the Chumash, I'm not liable like I did it. I'm liable like my animal did it. It's like my wealth. The fire belongs to me. That's why I'm chayev. Not because I did it. Because I protected the fire as best as I could. You know, the halach is if I did my best and nevertheless I caused you damage, I got to pay. I can't say I did my best. I hurt you. I got to pay. Now, when a boy say, then comes halachos of dalat sheimrim. Dalat sheimrim means we live in the world. We live in the world. And again, I want to underscore what I see as a yesod in Hilchos Mishpat, as the way I understand it. And believe me, I'm a very, very small lamp. This is just how I understand it. There is a presumption of normalcy. There is a presumption of Lasheves Yitzhara. People live together in a community. They share things. We travel on the same roads. I'm walking to yeshiva this morning, I was on time today, I think, right? So I woke you at 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's a little girl, must have been 7 or 8, standing at the street corner, but she's one step into the road, and maybe 3 feet in front of her is an idling car. The car is on, you can see the red light, the brake lights, and someone is sitting in a place where he's not supposed to be. He's in the walkway. You know how the streets go. You have 2 white lines that run this way, and then a bunch of lines. Your car's not allowed to be in that area. He's too close to the corner. And I pass this little girl. The light is red, but I'm a big boy, so I walk the street. And I'm looking at this girl. What am I thinking? There's a car 2 feet away from her. Very close to her. I don't know if the guy driving that car can even see her, or he sees her. Chas v'sholom, what happens? That guy backs up. She's standing there, huh? She was behind him, and she was not on the sidewalk. She was 1 foot into the street. And I literally walked looking back from Carroll and Kingston to the alley until I saw her across the street. Now, if I had seichel, I would go back and help her cross. Whatever. And what was I thinking? This girl is trusting a man who she doesn't know that he's going to see her. And even if he's in a rush, he's going to be careful when he backs up. Chas v'sholom, not to hurt her when he pulls out. And I'm watching this.
Or she's just not thinking because she's little.
That's certainly a part of it. She's thinking she should not have been on the street, should have been on the sidewalk. And forget, she did have enough seichel not to cross with me. I sort of looked at her when I was crossing and sort of indicated she should walk with me, but the light was red. She waited, but she was standing on the street. There's an enormous amount of trust. That little girl trusts that a person driving a car is going to see her and is going to be careful not to hurt her. And you know what? That's how it's supposed to be. It's not a nest, it's not a pellet, it's not a chiddush, it's not a miracle. That's how it's supposed to be. A person who's driving a motor vehicle has to look around and make sure he sees the little people. And again, he was parked illegally. Where he was sitting, he's not allowed to sit. I don't think he's allowed to idle there. He's sitting in the crosswalk. He was too close to the corner. But my point is, the way people live, even in the regular world, and certainly the way people live out by Torah, we share the same earth. Nobody lives on an island. We share the same earth. You think about, a lot of you have licenses and you drive cars. You are trusting complete strangers in very, very small margins. When you drive up Kingston Avenue and there's 2 cars parked on either side and there's 2 lanes of moving cars, and sometimes the cars are moving, 10, 15, 20 miles an hour, and you're very close to another car, you're trust that the guy next to you is going to behave like a mensch. That's how we live. It takes one guy not to be a mensch and cause all kinds of terrible damage. One guy to be drunk, which means not that he's a bad guy, his judgment is impaired. That's all it takes. If we got on a highway, people going at 70 miles an hour, the whole foundation of normal living is trust. What I am proposing is that's how the halachos of Choshen Mishpat are built. The halachos of Choshen Mishpat are built on the fact that people trust each other. A ganev is outside of those rules. A ganev has shown himself, he's announced himself to be, I don't play by the rules, I'm not a member of society, I'm a bad person. I don't respect another human being. So as a hemshech to that, once you establish that as a foundation, that people are going to treat each other respectfully, responsibly, and we're going to share the space, we're going to share the common space, we don't mean to hurt each other. The next halacha is human interaction. There are dalet shomerim. What are dalet shomerim? You're my neighbor. Sometimes I'm going to do something for you, and sometimes you're going to do something for me. Sometimes I'm going to do something for you, and I'm going to get nothing for it. That's called a shem chinam or a shayel. Yes. Sometimes you're going to do something for me, and you're going to get nothing for it. It's called a shem chinam or a shayel. Sometimes I'm going to do something for you, but I'll get a little bit. That's called a shem sacher or a seicher. Sometimes you'll do something for me, and you'll also gain. That's called a shem sacher or a seicher. It's fascinating. The Rambam, right? The Rambam has dalet shem. How does he divide it up? The first halacha is hilchos schidus. Schidus means a renter and a rentee, both. In the halachos of schidus, he includes both the halachos of someone who rents somebody else's property and somebody who's paid to watch somebody else's blessing, Hashem Yisachar. And then he has hilchos Shailo Pikaden, Shaila means a borrower, where one gets all the benefit, the other gets nothing. And Pikaden is Shemechinam. Shemechinam is also the same thing, where one gets everything, the other gets nothing. You have 4 halachas. And the 4 halachas are, in a normal civilization, people do things for one another. Sometimes one person does something for another, he gets nothing. You come over to me and say, Yossi, I got to go on vacation. I need you to water my plants. Or I'm going on vacation and I'm expecting some expensive packages to arrive. Please look out for them. When the packages arrive, take them into your home, hold them until I return. What are you giving me? You're giving me a thank you. You mean nothing. I am called a Shemechinam. I have everything to lose and nothing to gain. I'm not in any way, shape, or form benefiting from it. I'm doing you a favor. Why? That's what people do. Happens every day. Happens every day. You're in the airport. I mean, it's going to sound like a silly example, and you have 5 or 6 bags, whatever it is. You need to go to the bathroom, and some of those bags are expensive. You go over to a person sitting next to you who may be not looking the most dignified. You say, listen, I need to go away for 5 minutes. Can you just keep an eye on my bag? And he says, yeah. 90% of that is your trust of a total stranger. Why are you trusting that stranger? Because this is how people live. It's part of life. So in conjunction with the dinim of Adam HaMazik and Mamon HaMazik, which has a presumption that in a normal civilization, unless you're a Ganav are out of the rules. Ganav are different rules. You know, the guy who comes into the airport and he goes to the bag, where the bags come out of the dust, he just grabs anybody's bag and runs out of the airport. That is a Ganav. The person who mistakenly takes your bag and then discovers it 2 days later and he's 100 miles from the airport and he's lazy to bring it back, so he doesn't bring it back. So you had a loss, but he's not a bad guy. The first, a Ganav, is out of the civilization. When you understand that this is how the Torah presumes that regular people are going to be respectful of other people's property and expect other people to respect it, and therefore you have 4 categories. The extremes are where I gain and you gain nothing. You gain and I gain nothing. Those are 2 different extremes. Let's talk about them. Extreme number 1 is called a shomer chinam. You say to me, Yossi, I'm leaving town. Tomorrow a package is coming. Whatever, my refrigerator is being delivered. I'm not going to be home. Please let the refrigerator into your house. Let it sit in your garage. I'll come pick it up when I return. And I say thank you. I don't give you a dime. So I am taking full responsibility for your property. I have to wait for the delivery to come, and maybe it doesn't come on time, and it costs me inconvenience. I'm not profiting at all. Why am I doing it? Because you would do it for me. I'm inch. I'm reminded, for those who are familiar with history, we had a president whose name was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And I recently saw a study. I don't know who made the study, I don't know what basis. They decided that he was the greatest of all the 43 presidents. FDR is considered the greatest. I'm not so sure he deserves that title, but Zol Zayin Hazeh. FDR had a very big problem. There was a world war. It was a terrible war, and everybody knew it. And there was clear good guys and bad guys, you know? It wasn't, we're not sure who's right and the wrong. There was clear good guys. The Japanese and the Germans and the Italians were the shoyim, they were evil. And there were good guys, whatever it was, the rest of Europe, England, Russia, even Russia. But America refused to get involved in the war. Refused. Why? Because America got involved in World War I. And in 15 seconds, we lost 75,000 American boys. We got involved in a war that wasn't our business. America sent, whatever they're called, the doughboys over to Europe to fight on the Western Front. And by the way, if America doesn't send its troops, it's a real possibility that the Germans would win World War I. And we gained nothing from it. Our president, Wilson, was hoping to have the League of Nations, which is the forebearer, the father of what we now call the United Nations. But he couldn't do it. He made the League of Nations, but the Senate, he was a Democratic president and a Republican Congress, and they wouldn't support it. If America joined the League of Nations, there's no World War II. It's very simple. There's just no World War II. You talk about the Eibishter's thinking. And after World War II, Washington said, our first president said, beware of European entanglements. I mean, Europeans have been killing each other and they're the smartest people in the world, they're the best people in the world, they're the kindest people in the world. They just don't know how to stop killing each other. Otherwise, they're very nice guys. And they can tell us how to behave. That's one of the Europeans' great businesses. Europeans have, Baruch Hashem, a lot of gaiva. I'm sorry, Brits. It's just the way it is.
Wow.
And the French. We don't have any Germans here, so I don't have to apologize for that. But I don't know how I would apologize for that. But in any case, wait. So Washington already said, beware of European entanglements. So we got involved in World War I. After World War I, we had a president who ran on a platform which was called return to normalcy. Isolationism. America said, I don't care. The whole world can burn to ground, none of our business. Franklin Roosevelt knew that he's got to get involved in this war because the Germans are evil. Now, the Japanese helped him. But remember, the war in Poland starts in September 1939. Japan attacks Hawaii in December, 2 years and 3 months later. December is in 1941. That means the Second World War was more than 2 years old before America was able to join the war. And Americans would not allow our president to schlep us into the war. And we had stupid congressmen, politicians, it was more important that they should win a seat than they should do what was necessary for world peace. And they campaigned to make Roosevelt lose his third president, his term as president. It was very sensitive. So the president was trying to find ways to get America to help Europe, which almost from the beginning was only England. The rest of Europe capitulated without Chas v'Shalom getting involved in war. So he created what was called the Lend-Lease Act. Lend-Lease Act. We're going to lend them things. We're going to rent them things. It's not going to cost you anything. And he gave the example of a neighbor who borrows a garden hose. That was the example. You have a neighbor. He doesn't have a hose. And he used to water his lawn. He said, "Come, can I borrow your garden hose?" What? So you're helping him water his lawn? That's what people do. So he created this idea where he was trying to explain to Americans, this is what people do. They help each other. There's clear good guys. There's clear bad guys. The British need our ships, whatever they needed. We're going to lend and lease. We're going to help. America did fine, by the way. America became, for a period of time, the richest nation that ever lived on the face of this earth as a result of World War II. After the war, yeah. But before the war, this was the story. So there's a presumption. In a normal civilization, people help each other. A shay machina means you need a favor, I do it for you, I have nothing to gain. The extreme opposite of a shay machina is called a shayel. I want to borrow your garden hose. I don't have a hose. Can I borrow your hose? And you give it to me. You don't charge me rent. You just give it to me. I can return that hose damaged in a lesser condition than I took it from you. I don't have to pay, as long as it works. You gave me a hose, I get back to you a week later, and the guy says, look, it's frayed, the paint is peeled, some of the threads of the hose are rubbed out. I don't have to pay. Why? It's normal. I borrowed your hose, I used the hose for what hoses are used for. It became a little bit of wear and tear. I don't have to pay for it. So Shemachinam and Sharla, they're flanks, they're the extremes. One extreme is I'm doing something for you, I'm gaining nothing. I'm watching your property. And when I watch your property, I have liability. It's possible that something should happen to your property, I'm end up paying for it. Okay? But this is what people do. People help each other. So the halacha of Shemachinam is that he's potter from Geneva v'Aveid is chayiv b'shiyah. If I took your refrigerator into my home because you were on vacation and someone steals it or got lost on potter, if I was negligent, if I wasn't careful how I watched it, then I have to pay. Rabbi say, but there's one exception to the rule of Shemachinam. There's more than one, but there's one critical exception of Shemachinam. The exception to the rule of Shemachinam is called Shlichus Yad. Sholach Bayad. Shlichus Yad means this: I'm doing you a favor, right? You went on vacation. Your shipment of whatever it was, your refrigerator was delivered, and I took it into my house. I'm keeping it in my garage at the Yukam of your vacation. Unless I was negligent, I'm put to pay. If it was stolen, if it got lost, I don't have to pay. Right? One exception. You know what Shlichus Yad means? There's two opinions what Shlichus Yad is. One opinion is if I used it, and the other opinion is if I thought about using it. I took your refrigerator to my house. I'm gaining nothing. I'm doing you a favor. I'm getting nothing back except a mitzvah, which is a whole lumdis. Shlichus Yad means if I use that refrigerator, I'm not ashamed anymore. I'm a ganav. And there's an opinion who says, if I thought about using it, I didn't. I'm no longer Shemachinam, I'm a ganav. Why? Because when I agreed to watch your property, that's normal. When I decided to take your property without permission, I just became a ganav. When I became a ganav, I put myself in the category of a person who says, I'm not a member of this civilization. I'm outside the rules.
But you still didn't do it.
So this is the halach is you only chayiv for shlichus yad if you actually shaliach yad. Right? There's an opinion for machshav of shlichus yad. The reason I'm bringing it up is to bring out the point that how could you think that? It's not yours.
Shail is also using it.
Huh?
Shail is also using it.
Yeah, but a shail says he's taking it to use. Right? So this is the halacha. I am doing you a favor. I'm gaining nothing for it. I'm almost never liable. As long as I treat your property with respect. The minute I violate that law, the minute I become a shliach yad, which means to say, which is essentially a ganav, I don't respect your property, it's a different set of rules. That's the Hashem Mechinam. It's one extreme. The opposite extreme is a shayel. What's a shayel? I borrow your garden hose. If I borrow your garden hose, you gain nothing, you can only lose. And I gain everything. It's called kol hana shalai. I took the garden hose, I'm not paying rent. I give it back in a worse condition than I took it.
You could gain that, he'll let you borrow something from him.
Fine, but that's not the logic. The logic is we live together in a world and people will borrow from each other. In other words, point well taken that if I do him a favor, he'll likely do me a favor. But there's halachos about that. You're not allowed to be a nekev and neter. I do him a favor if he doesn't do me a favor. People favor each other. That's the clout, you understand? So I borrow your garden hose. If I give you back that garden hose, and that garden hose is in a lesser condition when I borrowed, I don't have to pay for it. That's what borrowers do. Okay? Now, if I use that garden hose, and this is a very complicated halacha. I don't know how that applies to hoses, but meisa machat malacha. If I borrowed your animal, I was a shayel, and it died while it's doing work. I didn't do anything wrong. It died while it's doing work. I'm also potter. I'm chayav for almost everything else, but if I used your property, which I borrowed, and I brought damage to that property within the normal order of how that property is used, I'm always going to be potter. Wait a minute, I lent you my hose, you make a broken hose. Or a damaged hose, but Beis HaMachmas Halach is potter. I forgot how it is by Mamon HaMazik. The logic to this is what happens in society. People help each other. The exception to the rule of shayel is ba'ol avimei. You know what ba'ol avimei means? If I borrow your hose and you're working for me, so then I'm pot even for pshia. If I borrow your hose, I borrow your animal, and you're at work to me, b'shas shaila, right? When I borrow the hose, you're working for me, so then I'm potted even if I'm a pesher, ba'ol avimei. Ba'ol avimei is exeres hakosov. It doesn't make any sense. It's not a logical law. And I have theories as to why there would be such a law. My theory is basically, and I wish I had more time to explain it, there's a rule in Torah. And this is a very simplistic idea, but it's just my idea. There's a rule in Torah that says that every single rule has exceptions except for one thing. There's a rule in Torah, every rule has exceptions except for one thing. Which rule in Torah has no exceptions? You know what that is? Avodah zarah. There's no way you could say this avodah zarah is okay. No such thing. Every rule has an exception. I borrow something from you. So I'm the full winner, you're the full loser. Any kind of damage I gotta pay. So the Torah made an exception. That if you're working in my house while that property is in my house, it's not a logical law, but it creates an exception to the law of chiyuv of shayel. Because there always needs to be an exception to the rule. That's my hypothetical, that's my theory. Now, Rabbi side, let's move on. The two extremes are A, I'm completely giving, I'm gaining nothing. B, you're gaining everything, I'm gaining nothing, right? Shay Mechinam, I'm watching something for you, I'm getting no benefit. Shayel, you're getting all the benefit, and I can only lose. In between Shayel and Shay Mechinam is Seicher and Neisei Sachar. Shay Mesachar, the Shay Mesachar. You say to me, listen to me, I'm going out of town, they're delivering a refrigerator, please watch it for me, and I'm going to pay you $5 a day to hold it in your house. So you're doing me a favor, because $5 a day is not what it's worth. You're not paying me the full market value of the shchiras, and the truth is I'm not sure about this detail. I'm giving you something to watch my property. So Taka, you're doing me a favor, but you're gaining a little bit. Because you're gaining a little bit, you have more liability. If it gets stolen or if it gets lost, you have to pay for oinus you're potter. So here's a guy's doing a favor for his neighbor. But he's profiting. He's doing a favor for his neighbor. He's watching his property. You guys, do me a favor, watch this. But I'll give you something. Because the the mafkid, the person who's asking you to do it, is giving you a little bit of money, so you have a certain amount of benefit. So the halachic, the laws of liability change. The other side of the coin is like, you can't do me a favor, I want to borrow your garden hose. Sure, it's $1 a day to rent the garden hose. So you're a renter, not a borrower. The minute you become a renter, not a borrower, both are benefiting. So Seicher and Shemei Sachar are real the same thing as Shoyel and Shemechinam, but Shemechinam and Shoyel are the extremes. Because in Shoyel and Shemechinam, one guy gets all the benefit, the other guy gets all the loss. And in Shemei Sachar and a Seicher, one guy gets most of the benefit, and the other gets a little bit of the benefit. But because the other gets a little bit of benefit, the halachas are different. So I want to generalize. The Dalet Shemrim, there are 4 categories. There's Shemechim, Shel and Seicher. What are these 4 things about? They're about what normal people do in normal relationships. They help each other. And the halachas of liability are predicated on those presumptions. The exception is a pesheya, if I'm negligent, and the exception is the shaleach yad. If I think or I actually use it, at that moment I become a ganav. The moment I become a ganav, I'm not a regular person. I'm out of the civilization, and the halachas that assume that people mean to be good to each other fall away from me, and my liability increases. So this is the flow. The last week and the beginning of this week was 4 halachas of either a person hurting, stealing from another person, which is the worst kind of mazik, a person damaging another person's property without wanton intent, my property hurting your property, and then the second thing we just discussed, the Dalet Shemrim. The Dalet Shemrim, again, I borrow from you, you borrow from me. I rent from you, you rent from me. I watch for you, you watch for me, with money, without money. These halachas are all predicated on the normal involvement of people with one another. And otherwise, I just want to say that what I just said to you tonight, the halachas of Mamon HaMazik, and the Dalet Shemrim ends the direct halachas of business in Parshas Mishpatim that do it later. In other words, I'm going to be giving you another share next week. But the class we're doing next week is not talking about financial involvement between a person and a person. It's other kind of inyanim. Okay, let's stop my.